Hi, it's Batabile. I want to give you a heads up about something that happens in this episode. In this episode, my brother and I talk about U.S. immigration and asylum policy, and some of the information that I bring forward is not complete. It's not wrong, but it isn't complete. And because I do believe that it is critical that when we have these conversations, we do so on the basis of accurate information, I've posted a video at the end of the episode that clarifies what I say and also gives you links to resources that can give you better information. So I encourage you to watch the video, enjoy this episode, and thank you for listening.
It's TheH8Show. I'm your host, Mthombeni. I'm a specialist in conflict management and dispute resolution and the founder and principal of our sponsor today. Today's sponsor is Untangled Resolutions. At Untangled Resolutions, we help our clients to design and implement conflict and complaint management systems that are trauma-informed, inclusive, and effective. Contact us at untangledresolutions.com to see how we can help you to improve how your code of conduct works for you. All right, welcome to the show, everybody. I am your host, Mthombeni, and today I have a very, very special guest. This is an experience that I had not thought that I'd have a chance to have, but here we are. My guest today is my brother. Jonathan Mthombeni, although you might hear me call him Yoni, because that is a common nickname for Jonathan in Israel. And when my parents named you, they decided to actually call you Yohanathan, and Yoni is the nickname for Yohanathan. So here we are, right? So we're gonna, kind of be flexible around that. I asked my brother to come on the show today because I can't think of a topic that is more appropriate.
Germaine.
Pardon?
Germaine is the word that
Germaine, exactly. To the theme of this show, which is about modeling, having conversations about difficult things with people, particularly around our identities and what we believe. So what happened is that about a month ago, almost exactly a month and like 2 days ago, I was on the phone with my parents. It was just before the election, and they told me that my brother had voted for Donald Trump. And all of us were in absolute shock. We were somewhat dismayed. I had a lot of thinking to do because I actually really respect my brother. I respect his intelligence, and it just didn't seem to align with my understanding of his intelligence. And so the fact that I was starting to question his intelligence bothered me. And I thought, the better thing to do would be to have a conversation. Let me ask him, like, what happened? How did he come to this place, this decision, and how does that decision align with his identity? So that's what we're talking about today. And Yoni, welcome to the show. See, what I can't call you Jonathan. I've never done that.
That's fine. Yeah, that's gonna work.
Thank you.
All right.
So welcome to the show. And I'd like to start by laying a foundation, right? Let's understand a bit about who you are, your self-concept, what's your identity. And then we can talk about what brought you to decide that Donald Trump was the better choice for you. All right. How's that? Okay.
All right.
That's so if I ask you, who are you? Like, what's your identity? What motivates you in your walk on this earth?
Well, I'm a father and a husband, and obviously a brother and an uncle. And I am, a citizen of the United States, and also a member of the world. I'm a practicing Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And so, all of that kind of feeds into who I am and my worldview. Currently, I'm in the transportation industry, which is something that came as a bit of a surprise to me, but has checked a lot of boxes in terms of what I really like to do. I found that I really love service, and I love travel, and I love people, and so it aligns nicely. And most of all, I love when every day is different, and and change is the norm. So you got to roll with it, and you got to stay on your toes. And I like those kind of environments. So yeah, that's a bit about me and who I am.
It's really interesting. I was listening to you list all of those things and taking note of what seems to be most important. And you started off with family. Everything that you were talking about was about family, and then you talk about your faith, and then also how you occupy your time, and make your living, right? I was also interested in what you didn't mention,
Mm-hmm.
which is that you are an immigrant
Mm-hmm.
and you're also a Black man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when talking about all the things that you mentioned, and there's more, you're somewhat of a musician, you're a musician. You conducted a choir for quite a bit of time, so music is really important in your life. And there are all sorts of other aspects of who you are. Um, and just because you had that list doesn't mean that it's exclusive to just that. I recognize that,
Sure.
but I also was interested in what you put first,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really interesting. So talk to me a little bit more about family and faith. What do those mean for you?
Well, that really gives me my purpose. Becoming a father kind of changes your perspective on, what your mission is on the earth, and what your priorities are on the earth. When you got a little guy, he becomes, he's the future, and so everything you do, ultimately is in order to give him the best chance to grow up and be successful and have his own family and be happy. Excuse me. So, so that plays a huge, role in purpose, and of course, being a husband, having a partner, and wanting to support somebody through life and be supported, is a very special thing. Um, and then, in terms of your spiritual life, um, there's an expectation that God has plans for you, and that your life in many ways will be meaningful in an ultimate sense. And so that lends, strongly into purpose, in the sense that even though I may not know exactly, what that plan is or what that's going to look like, I need to remain ready and open, and to fulfill that ultimate purpose that God has. So yeah, those two, intersect, and probably play the biggest roles in what I do.
Hmm. So I appreciate you describing that, and then also coming into what you do on a daily basis. I appreciated you highlighting that the work that you're doing now allows you to be of service, and that you've discovered that being of service is really important to you. But you also mentioned that you're now in the transportation industry, which is very different from what you were going to be. And I am going to use my uh, knowledge and
Insider
background.
knowledge.
Pardon?
Yeah. Insider knowledge.
My insider knowledge, exactly. Because I think this is important too, right? But one of the things that we're really interested in exploring on this show is how stereotypes impact people's identities and how they operate in the world and how other people see them, right? And so, as you said, you didn't start out uh, thinking that you were going to be in the transportation industry. Where did you start out?
Well, I come from uh, a community where everyone had the expectation of going to college, number one. And the majority of us really, we weren't even really made aware of a lot of different career choices. We knew medicine, we knew education, we knew law, and not much else.
We
And
didn't
so,
really even know law.
yeah, not much, but it was on the table. We had, lawyers in the community, somewhat, but yeah, it certainly wasn't as, pervasive or ubiquitous as medicine and education. Um, but yeah, and so, I went to college, and majored. I had a decision to make. My interests were religion and business, and ultimately I decided, um, you know, I can always, do business. Business is a doing thing, and you can learn things and put tools together along the way. Because I wanted to do business, I didn't necessarily want to work, or get a job with a business degree. But so I thought, let me answer some of these, metaphysical questions that have been weighing on my mind, and kind of get that, preparation behind me. In high school, you know how everybody chooses, what are you going to be when you grow up, to put in the yearbook. I put missionary doctor. So so religion pre-med seemed to align best with my goals at the time. And so, yeah, I was on the pre-medicine track. I even started medicine as a foreign medical student at the University of Mthombeni, and I transferred to Caribbean medical school. And this was, during 2008 when they had that banking crisis. And the bank that was funding the school collapsed. And this is when we had already come to Illinois to do our fifth semester, which includes prepping for step one. And so when funding fell through, I had to get a job because I was by myself in Chicago by that time, and I came down to literally my last pennies. Literally, like I took my last pennies and bought gas so I could make it to this job interview. And they called me while I was still on my way home, uh, and informed me that they wanted to offer me the job. I ran out of gas, Tavi, on the way home. That's how I didn't have money. Okay. And I had to call AAA, and they came and gave me a gallon of gas. I think he gave me a little bit more, maybe a gallon and a half. I don't know if he was feeling bad for me. So I could make it home. And that's how I got started in Chicago. That was, kind of my inception story. And so I kind of was at a crossroads of, do I still want to pursue this medicine thing, or do I want to get started with life, kind of? So survival kind of took the lead in terms of priorities, and as time went on, I became more and more comfortable not returning to the medicine track. And so I entered first into the durable medical equipment space, and I did some reimbursement. I worked for a reimbursement company, like an accounting firm, for a while, and then I got a call from an individual I'd worked with at my first company to come work with her at Medline, and that was kind of the game changer for me. And I got into contracting and implementation, and did well there, and became their RFP writer, and the lead eventually. And so that took me into sales, and then COVID. And once COVID hit, we all went home, and I got laid off. And one day I got a sticker on my door: come be a school bus driver, $5,000 signing bonus. I said, $5,000 signing bonus. I said, well, I could sure use a $5,000 signing bonus. It didn't end up being a $5,000 signing bonus, by the way.
It was a scam.
Yeah, it's more of a retention bonus. Okay, so you can get you could get about 1,000 up front, after you're done with everything. But then it's like 500 a quarter after that until you reach 500. So,
okay,
but anyway,
there's always a catch.
There's always a catch. It's too good to be true. But I really enjoyed the kids. I enjoyed, I didn't know how it would be. It was crazy. Like I never, ever imagined in my life I'd be doing something like that. But you build relationships. And that was really the key with me, is like building relationships with people, and also providing them with, like going above and beyond to provide a great experience for them, and seeing that appreciation, like, just little things like standing outside my bus to greet them coming in so they could see, where their bus is every day, and, greeting them by name, and having conversations. Eventually, they start talking to you and telling you what's on their mind and what's going on and what they're going through. And Christmas came around, and I got some Christmas presents, and that it just kind of touches you and stuff. So I similar to what I wanted to do in medicine, and what I saw Dad especially doing at the clinic, you start building relationships with people, and that's really rewarding.
And just explain, sorry to jump in on you, but just explain. So our dad is a retired pediatrician, and our mom is a retired nurse practitioner, and they had a medical practice together for about 17 years, which we all worked in at one point.
Right. And you see, they had a wall of pictures, that kids would, they would send in, with cards and things like that. And so Dad would put that up on the wall, and you see these kids grow up, on the wall through their pictures, until eventually they started bringing their own kids in, yeah. So building relationships was really, food for the soul, and really checked a huge box there. And I also found, I found just nourishment in service. I found that in serving people, and especially when you do things that you don't have to do, in order to make somebody's life better, there's a joy in that. It ties back into, it is better to give than to receive. There's wisdom and truth in that. And so I started connecting with these things, but financially it wasn't viable. And so I moved into to a different company that was doing charters, and that opened the door of being able to do tours. And so I've taken a lot of little old ladies, across the United States, to the Black Hills of South Dakota, to see Mount Rushmore, and over to Martha's Vineyard, and Orlando, took band kids to Manhattan, and really just, I've always known I enjoyed travel. We had an opportunity to travel quite a bit. Me especially, coming into, so I had the opportunity to play in symphonic band, because I wasn't doing great at trumpet, and I got pulled to the side and like, hey young man, why don't you try this tuba, put them big lips on this whole here tuba, see how that works.
He did not say that.
No, he didn't say that.
So our band director, he threw the racers. He
Yeah,
did throw
he did.
he did throw erasers, but I
Mm.
can't imagine. Our band director pulled you aside and said, "Get off trumpet."
Yeah, he said, he did me the biggest favor. He said,
Okay.
I want you to try this. And I did. And you know, I started playing tuba from that moment on. But the thing was, I was the only tuba player, at that time, in my grade. So you first chair was guaranteed. And then finally, when I got to high school and I got to audition, then there were three of us, but it got me into this, the honor band, if you will, and they toured. And my freshman year, we toured to Europe, and they would do this every 4 years or so. So by the time my senior year came around, we were going back to Europe, and we went to Scandinavia the first time, and then Germany, Hungary, Austria, etc. Um, the next time. So it looks like my video has paused. Can you see me?
So your video has paused, but I think we just keep going. At least we have audio, and hopefully it'll come back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. And I know we had this issue a little bit. We started, this is our second attempt actually at starting this recording, but I think so long as we have audio, it's okay.
All right.
So you got to catch the travel bug. Now have we lost your audio? So Yoni, I think we might
I
have
knew
lost
that
your.
I enjoyed.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah, keep going.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. And prior to that, I don't know if you remember, but I had a close friend, Yoshi, and
Oh,
and
we've
we
lost
went.
your audio again. I'm so sorry, Yoni. The audio is coming in and out.
Okay.
So I think what we'll do is go ahead and have you go back to you know you said that the last thing that I heard you say completely was that the first trip with symphonic band was to Scandinavia, and then the second one was Germany, Austria, and I've forgotten, I think, what the third country was.
Yeah, opportunity to travel the world, and be exposed to traveling and the benefits of traveling. So I already knew that it's something I really enjoyed. And so now being in an industry that took me, all over now the United States, which is something I hadn't done before, um, really was, just amazing. Like, really, I started to feel that feeling of enjoying your work so that it doesn't even feel like work. And that's not to say it's not long days and, it's difficult driving for so many hours and then loading and unloading the luggage of 50 individuals. It's a big challenge and it's a lot of work. But the whole experience really feels like we're all going on vacation together. And if you're good at what you do, the group really embraces you, as one of them. And they want to take pictures with you and hang out with you and spend time with you and spend money on you, feed you, and just kind of love on you. And that's super rewarding.
Mm.
So um so yeah, that's brought me to where I am, in a professional sense. But to be honest, sometimes I feel like a Moses or a Joseph, in the sense that Moses came up in the palace and everyone had, this idea of what he was going to be. And then his life takes a completely different path and he ends up being a shepherd in the desert, until one day his life changes. And same with Joseph, he grew up, special kid and coat of many colors and everything. all this promise, and from the pit into slavery, and from slavery, to prison. And he's there a long while before his life completely changes, and he goes to become, a governor. So so we don't know what's going to happen in life, and I have an appreciation for that. But I'm really enjoying um, each day, and enjoying the opportunity to enjoy what I do for a living.
Mm. I'm so glad that you have said this. It explains so much that was, complete mystery to me. And I think it does come out of, the stereotypes that people have, both about people who, uh, drive buses for a living, for example, and then also people who go to medical school. And, I can imagine for a lot of people, I know for our parents, it has been bewildering.
Hmm.
You got through to your third year in medical school
Hmm. Hmm.
and now you are driving a bus.
Hmm.
And what I'm really appreciating is your opening the doors to understand that being of service in that particular way does require skill. It requires dedication. It requires diligence. It requires all of the things that you would need to do as a doctor.
Hmm.
It's important, because you are the person who gets people from uh, point A to point B safely. I think about you driving a motor coach in
Hmm.
Manhattan.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Maybe the most stressful thing I've ever done, and that's coming from having an experience when when I was doing surgery. Um, at the end of surgery one, you get assigned to a surgery, a real life surgery. And so this was maybe my second or third surgery observing. But at the end, when the surgeon was closing, he turns to me and asks me, and this is all in Spanish, by the way. He asked me, how is my, do I know my knots, And oh my goodness, we'd been doing knots on the knot board like all, semester. And now it was time, the truth. And I said, well, yeah, no, I know my basic knot. And he said, okay, bueno. He said, do your basic knot then. And so he started on his end of the table, and I started on my end of the table. And I was so nervous, Tabi, putting the suture in. Like, I mean, this was like, I couldn't believe it. This is a real life patient, and I was closing. And so I did mine, very carefully. You make your knot and you lift it up, and the surgical nurse makes the cut, on the suture. And I did 4, and he had done about 8 by that time. And he looked over at mine, inspected them a little bit, and then he stepped back from the table and took off his gloves. So he wasn't coming back, Tabi. There wasn't oh, let me jump back in here and help you out. He took off his gloves. Getting in your gloves is a big process.
Right.
Okay. So when the gloves come off, you're done. And he was like, okay, finish. Good Lord. So driving in Manhattan was probably more stressful than that,
Wow.
because it was my second trip ever driving a motor coach. And I'm sent into
Wow.
probably technically the most technically difficult place
Yes.
I've driven to date.
I think, Yoni, it's the technically most difficult place to drive, period, in the United States.
It may
Period.
be. It may be because I've been to many cities, Tabi. I
Yes.
live in Chicago, which is very difficult. I've been to DC. I've been, I'm in LA now. Um, Manhattan. I've been to Brooklyn, Manhattan. What has is far and away is just the most difficult. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've driven an SUV in Manhattan. That's as close as we've gotten. Well, let me see. Yes, I've driven an SUV in Manhattan, and that was a nail biter. I mean, I've driven in Nairobi. I've actually driven an SUV in Nairobi.
Okay.
And I think they are difficult in different ways.
Yeah.
But a motor coach in Manhattan. And so, I'm gaining what's happening here is that I'm gaining both an appreciation for the technical difficulty of what you do, and
Mm.
also having my mind kind of opened up to the ways in which, my own preconceived uh uh what's the word I'm looking for? Preconceptions of that's not the word I'm looking for, but we'll use that one.
Mm.
Stereotype is the word I'm looking for. My own stereotypes, established stereotypes about bus drivers.
Yeah.
I'm having to really question that and recognize with some sense of shame that I've been unfair and ignorant about what it takes to do the job. And you grew up, like you said, we grew up in a town where in a school where
Mhm.
everybody's going to college, number one, and
Yeah.
then it's not, are you going into medicine, but what field?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or education, as you said. I will remind you, I said something about not much about law school. When I told our mom and dad that I was going to go to law school, dad kind of sat back inside and he said, "Oh, we'll make sure to keep a room for you in
Ah!
the house."
Oh, that's hilarious.
Right, exactly. So, there
Yeah.
was no expectation of success when
Right.
it came to law. It was a really, like you said, a really narrow set of expectations about what you would become. But then also there was a lot of assumption
Hmm.
about people who weren't going into professions as lofty as medicine,
Hmm.
right? Or other similarly related professions like law and so forth.
Hmm.
So what do you run into that? If you tell people, I if you say I'm a bus driver, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's real subtle. Um, it's sometimes, but or I should say the majority of the time. But especially when interfacing with people who share the same background that we do. Um, you know, uh, I have a friend, for instance. He spent some time um, working, as a mover, driving a Class A, semi truck all over the country, working for the union. I'm sorry, for the conference, moving our teachers and our pastors and, across the country. And he eventually went back to school and got his master's and now his PhD. And, um, it's almost like he returned to, he returned to finish what we were all expected to do. And I think that there's that same expectation with that community that I grew up with, which, okay, that's great. Okay, that's what you're doing right now. Cool. So so when are you doing your master's? You know, so yeah, I think 100%. Um, I even see it now. The project that I'm working with now is with clinicians um, in the mental health field, and you kind of get that sense too, as you work with them and you listen to them talk and etc. Um, People do, whether consciously or subconsciously, um, separate themselves into hierarchies based on their perceptions of you know their how much money they make, um, and and what roles they have. So that definitely does come into play.
Hmm. So when you're encountering that, what is your approach?
Just humility, like I I was really moved by a certain text in scripture that describes what Christ did in terms of laying down his glory, to take on humanity. And it says he took, being God, he took of himself no report. And essentially, he laid down his crown to take on humanity, even to the point of the cross, even to the point of being spat on and beaten and executed. And so, you know, when I was chewed on that scripture, I had to ask myself, who am I? You know what I mean? To puff out my chest and, walk around and be offended at, you know, I I have realized that whatever you're doing in life, you are putting tools in the tool bag for what's coming next. And the best thing you can do is to do what you're doing with all your strength and your might, and learn, be humble, be a student. Um, there are treasures, there are gems, in every, around every corner, under every rock, in every facet of life. So if you're at a place where you have no status, use that time to continue putting tools in your tool bag. It takes me back to Joseph. It takes me back to being a slave. He became the best slave. He became the head slave, the lead slave, you know, um, through his ethic. And then when he became a prisoner, eventually he became the head prisoner, and was given responsibilities. And all of those tools he put in his tool bag came to serve him as governor. When he became governor, he had already had the experience of leading, I think it was Potiphar's house. He'd already had the experience of leading out in the jail. And so now he had real leadership experience. He did not sit back and wallow in his title or his position. He just did his best. And and that is what served him when he was now put in a position of real power. So be faithful over the little things, and then you can be faithful over the big things. That's kind of the approach I take.
That is just so amazingly inspiring, Yoni. And as you are describing this, I'm thinking about, my own work, about the people that I work with. And sometimes, I run into people who are feeling really discouraged about where
Mhm,
they are and how that is different from what their aspirations have been. And that message is so important.
mhm,
I'm sure that a lot of people who are listening right now can take solace in that, can take inspiration from that wherever you are, be the best of whatever it is that you're
mhm,
doing. And that you
mhm,
understand that it is just this time. It's this period of time, and
mhm,
that things always change, and you never know where what you are learning now is going to serve you later.
mhm.
Right. It's so very important,
Right.
an amazing lesson to learn. And I'm also appreciating what you said about humility and about the importance of being humble, and what that contributes to you still finding your own, well, not finding, but being settled in your own self-worth, being grounded in knowing your own value even when other people don't recognize your value. That's so very important.
Mhm,
But then you voted for Donald Trump, who must be
mhm.
the least humble person ever. And so, with all the wonderful things that you have just said, this is one of the reasons why when mom and dad said, you voted for Donald Trump, I was just completely I was laid out. Okay. I mean, I don't know that I've been that surprised by anything else. And so, I still struggle to make sense of it. So I thought, let me ask you, how does all that you have just described about yourself and who you are align with voting for Donald Trump?
Well, when it comes to voting, one thing I try to keep in mind is that we don't really know these people, and we don't know what's really on their heart or what they're really like. And so I'm not going to, we can see certain things, based on what they do. Um, but I'm not as invested in voting for a really like uh, like a model individual as I am in voting on the policies and the issues, and what I think is going to bring about what I feel are the best outcomes for the country and for myself and my family. And so, you know, you know, Donald Trump has been, uh, caught up in the whole Stormy Daniels thing, the whole, grab them thing, a lot of kind of unsavory uh, situations, shall we say. Um, but one thing that, uh, you know, one thing about Trump is that I believe he really he says what he thinks. Like he he almost can't help it, um, which doesn't make him a fantastic politician in the traditional sense. But I think that's what caught people's ears, especially initially, like when they said, Trump, you ain't paying no taxes. What's that about? And he come out and say, yeah, I don't pay no taxes. I don't pay no taxes because I take advantage of every loophole, you know what I mean, that's given to us wealthy people, just like everybody else. And like everyone was like, what? Chappelle had something on that, right? On Saturday Night Live. He talks about how everybody was shocked, that this guy was spilling the tea like that. So yeah, so for me, it was really more about who do I think can help us get out of these wars? Who do I think is going to help the economy the most? Who do I think has the better social policies? And I'm conservative leaning to begin with, and so a lot of the kind of conservative policies resonate with me, um, you know, uh, as a whole, and so that's what ultimately led me to that decision. I wasn't able to quite get there the last election, or the not the last election, but I guess the last two elections. But this third time, I was actually able to get there and um, feel comfortable with it.
Mhm. It's his social policies that tend to concern me most. So I'm interested then in hearing a little bit more about how your own values align with his social policies.
Well, so for instance, I live in Chicago, right? And our mayor, Brandon Johnson, um, had his rhetoric was that Chicago we wanted immigrants, and you know, we're able to bring them in, and we recognize our strength is in, it lies with immigration and immigrants, and et cetera, et cetera. This very beautiful, glowy, feel good um, stance and perspective on, you know, on immigration. And that was happening when he didn't have to put up, you know what I mean? When we didn't have a whole bunch of immigrants in Chicago at that time. Um, and so when the governor of Texas and, I think a few other places started busing immigrants to these cities that had said that they want, uh, or, they were open to immigration and they wanted the immigrants, our budget shortfall ballooned to up over $400 million. And now Johnson was in trouble. He needed a way to quick raise some money. And so he proposed, now he had run, by the way, on a I'm not going to raise your property taxes ticket. Okay. And now he comes and presents the budget plan. And about 40 minutes into his speech, he gets around to saying, and we're going to have to hike property taxes by $300 million in order to make this work. And let me tell you, there was a great backlash, and people were not happy. And eventually, the city, council, the aldermen, all voted this down like unanimously. But the problem persists and was growing. And so now for 2025, Chicago is looking at a budget shortfall of nearly $1 billion. It's like 980 something million dollar shortfall. And so for me, sometimes the rhetoric doesn't line up with reality. Like, it's compassionate, it sounds good, it feels good, but is it feasible? Like, what would need to happen in order for this to be viable? For us to have open doors, for instance. And so it's not. So for me, it comes back to very basic things that we all have to decide in our personal lives. We'd all love to do good, Tabi. Like when I say we, I'm talking about the people that you and I may know and grow up with and all that. I'm sure there are people out there who couldn't care less, but but many people want to do good, and you can, but I can't take the money that I need to pay for JJ's school. JJ's my son. JJ's school, or to buy him shoes, and and donate that to charity, and leave JJ without without care, right? I have to, at the end of the day, I have to make decisions about how to spend my money and what my priorities are going to be. And right now, the people of Chicago are incensed that they're being overlooked for people who are foreign to not only the city but the country itself. And now we're looking at nearly $1 billion shortfall, which eventually we're going to have to find the money from somewhere. So eventually, the cost of living is going to go up significantly. So that's where I'm at. Is that sure? We value compassion and we value these things, but we can only do what we can do.
Well, so this is eye-opening, and I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. And as I was listening to you, I of course I have questions, right? So if you don't mind, I'm gonna like poke around a little bit
Yeah.
at that, and it comes from two places, right? What I'm understanding you to say is that while you are a person of compassion, you are also a pragmatist and a realist, and that you need to, and see the necessity of putting your own family first,
Hmm.
and that while you are a person of compassion, you just don't feel that it is um, feasible or wise to have what you said, open door policy. And we could have some differences of thought around whether it's truly an open door policy, so
Hmm.
there's that. But ultimately the effect is, or the result is, that you have an influx of people who are in tremendous need
Hmm.
coming into the city, and so there's a question about how do we pay for this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so there are two places where I find myself, trying to reconcile what you're telling me in terms of your beliefs
Hmm.
juxtaposed with who you are.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, we could decide which one to go with first or whatever, but it comes from two places. One, the fact of you being an immigrant
Hmm.
who, even though we don't characterize it this way in our family story, we basically fled apartheid.
Yes.
And the people who are at the border in Mexico, a large uh, segment of those people are fleeing conditions that are, I think, one could say that they're worse than the
Hmm.
conditions that we fled. So there's that aspect of it, who as a person who yourself um, is an immigrant, and that's a part of your core story. What does it mean then to look at others who face the same things that you did, and we had to depend on people making sacrifices for us to be able to leave that terrible situation and to come here, and thrive, right? So there's that. And then the second part for me, that raises questions for me, is that you're a person of faith.
Hmm.
uh, we if you look for, especially in the Old Testament, and I'm sorry, in the New Testament, but then also in the Old Testament, I'm thinking in my head, right? I'm going through, all of the different stories and parables and so forth. But particularly in the New Testament, you have time and time and time again when there's nothing. The loaves and the fishes, for example,
Hmm.
um, or the water, turning water into wine. Or if you look at the Old Testament, I get Elijah and Elisha mixed up. It's really terrible. I need to fix that. But so many times when there was, for example, there's famine in the land, and either Elijah or Elisha, you tell me, winds up at the brook Cherith, and God sends ravens, to feed him until the brook
Yeah.
runs dry. And then he finds a widow woman with a son, and she's about to make their last meal.
Yeah.
And he says, well, just, make some bread for me. And so she does. She gives him what she was going to give her little boy.
Mm.
And the result is that the meal never runs out, and she and her son and the prophet are fed for the entire the entire famine.
Mm.
There's the woman whose husband died, and her creditors come and threaten to take her sons into slavery. And the
Mm.
prophet says, what do you have in your house? And she says, all I have is a little, container of oil. And he says, gather all the containers you have and go to your neighbors and gather all the containers and bring them into your house and shut the house and start pouring oil. And the oil kept going and going.
Mm.
And so, as a person of faith, my understanding that these things and that this is part of your faith tradition. I also wonder about whether your pragmatism really aligns with your faith.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, wherever you want to start.
Okay, yeah. So, with respect to faith, I think in our story in particular, our story is a story of faith. Um, and I say that because uh, beyond all odds, our parents exercised faith in God that this dream could be um, seen through. And because of that, they did not try to subvert the law. They did not try to come in the back door or um, uh, uh, they they applied for visas and were awarded visas.
They were denied.
Well, eventually the passports were stamped. Uh,
Do you know how that happened?
well, an individual was moved in the office apparently to stamp them, but they came in legally, Tavi.
Mhm.
And in the Bible, when you are exercising faith, it things don't go well for you when you take things into your own hands and decide to um, try to skirt the um, the uh, or there's a word I'm looking for, but it means to be sneaky. Basically, it means to be dishonest. Um, we have a process for um, people who are seeking to enter this country based on the hardships that they have at home, asylum seekers, etc. And the problem is that people want to circumvent the process in order to to get here, maybe more quickly, more easily, etc. And it's simply not appropriate. And not is it just not appropriate, but it's not sustainable. It's just not. Um, and we're seeing that in not only in Chicago, but we're also seeing that in New York, where the mayor there started off with very similar rhetoric to Mayor Johnson in Chicago, and eventually reached the point where he said, "This will destroy New York City. This issue. This is not sustainable." And so we have to be. There has to be a level of uh, where you have to deal with reality that crossing the border illegally is not a sustainable way to address the problem of people who are looking um, to immigrate to the United States for a better life. There has to be a sensible process for that, and people need to follow it in order for it to be viable.
Right. So, there's philosophy and there are
Mm-hmm.
facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also there is, the value of this conversation that you and I are having, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
keeping all of that in mind, right? In navigating this conversation, because I really have to truly understand and believe that I'm not looking to change your mind about anything, but to really understand like
Mm-hmm.
where you're coming from around this. And one of the things that I'm feeling very concerned about right now has to do with the accuracy of your facts,
Okay.
right? So you are saying, quite rightfully, that people should follow the rules, right? There's a process, and that they should follow the rules, and circumventing the rules, doesn't do them, it doesn't do the country any good. It doesn't do them any good. You're saying that with our family, we followed the rules. And so this is why things worked out for us. Going to our family, not to say that we are here illegally, we are not, because there was a stamp in the passport. And it sounds like, offline, you and I could have a conversation about how the stamps got there.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Okay.
indeed, the stamps were there and they were legitimate stamps. And somebody stuck out her neck for us in order for those stamps to get there.
Okay.
Somebody stuck out her neck in order for those stamps to get there. So there's more to that story.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, see, for me, that's an example of faith rewarded. When we stepped out to get these stamps, there was a high expectation that would be unsuccessful. Many in our shoes had been unsuccessful prior, and we had dad here already. Like we had many reasons for to be rejected. So the fact that someone stuck out their neck in order to get those stamps in our passports, to me, is a fulfillment of the rewarding of the faith, to say that we're not going to try and figure out how to do this, how to subvert the system in order to, cheat our way into this. We're not going to live like that. We are going to depend on God to bless our efforts and do what we cannot do for us. That's what faith looks like to me.
Right. Well, so I appreciate that. And then let's get back down to what's happening at the border then, right? So there's that one aspect, and I'm going to come back to the sticking out of the neck in a minute. But now at the border, so what do you understand to be the correct procedure for being able to apply for asylum?
You mean from like what is the current process, or what do I think the process should be, or
no? What is the current process if somebody wants to claim asylum?
Yes.
What are they supposed to do?
I don't know very much about that process at all. From what I understand, there was a policy put in place that asylum seekers needed to wait in Mexico, for example, and wait for a judge to hear their case before they could come into the United States. So that leads me to believe that it wasn't that way beforehand. But it seems that you're supposed to come to the border, make an application. A judge is going to hear your case and make a decision as to whether you're granted asylum or not. That is the little that I know about that process.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it would be great if it were that simple. It would be wonderful if it were that simple. And you know what would be awesome? We might follow up on this, because I think educating people is really important too. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our cousin sister friend, Loida,
Mm-hmm.
if she would come on, because she is an immigration attorney. And so she is an expert, an actual expert in this. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that, being properly informed is really important, because when people's lives are at stake, making choices on the basis of, I don't know, that seems to me, not to be kind of irresponsible as a human being. If you're not sure that they are or aren't following the rules. I do know this. I have actually been on a team that litigated an asylum case. So when I was a very junior baby attorney, our firm took on a pro bono case, and I was on the team that eventually won asylum for a woman who had been trafficked, basically brought into the United States, and then horribly abused by her eventual ex-husband. And so what I remember, right? So again, like you said, the rules may have changed and that sort of thing, but you actually have to, in a sense, break the law, quote unquote, in order to present yourself for asylum. You have to cross the border. And so, as you said, the fact that this is a new rule does signal that there was a change in that policy. But in order, you have to present yourself and be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was what I understood it to be. And so that's why I'm also kind of hesitating to make a definitive statement about that. It would be great to get Loida on, to clear that up. Yes, I'm gonna see if she'll do it. Because this is such a huge bone of contention for a lot of people, talking about, people following the process. And when people are following the process and we have an idea of what the process, we think that the process does look like or should look like, and there's misinformation out there and disinformation out there about what the process looks like, to make a judgment as to whether or not a person is acting within within the policies, without actually knowing the policies, I'm thinking is kind of irresponsible, right? But what I've
Uh-huh.
understood, is that people coming, to the border for asylum, it's not like you get in line in the way it is when you're looking to immigrate.
So, just out of curiosity, what percent of the people that are crossing the border illegally do you think are eligible asylum seekers?
So I don't know. And I do believe, from what I have read, that it is rather high, because you have people coming from oh, good grief, why am I going to blank on the name of the place right now? But you have people coming from South American countries that are just in a complete shambles at the moment. You have people coming from Haiti. You have people coming from Ukraine.
Does that qualify you for asylum, though, to be, poor?
They're not coming because they're poor. They're coming because their lives are in danger. And that's
Okay.
what asylum is about. Asylum says, you know, my life is in danger and my government is not going to protect me. Those
Okay.
are the two basic elements. There's more to it, but the two basic elements. Either, I'm subject to persecution by my government,
Right.
or I'm subject to persecution by others in my country, and my
And my
government won't
life is at
protect me.
stake.
Pardon?
Right. And my life is at stake.
Right. My government is not going to protect me, or my government is who's looking to harm me.
Yeah,
And I have
I'd be
nowhere else to
curious
go.
to see the numbers on who actually, that it seems like a high standard to me.
It
And
is.
I'd be curious to find out what percentage of people are we really talking about when we're talking about asylum seekers, and then what is the rule for an asylum seeker? You come in, you get arrested. That makes it sound like you're meant to be in custody.
No,
Are
right.
you what does that mean to be arrested?
Yeah.
And then can you just travel all over the country while you're in this status of seeking asylum?
Right. So, and Honduras is the name of the country that I was trying to remember. And the situation in Honduras, and the part that the United States has played in creating that situation, is something that I think is important for people to really look into, to understand why people are not just fleeing Honduras, but, for example, sending little children by themselves. As a father, imagine having to make a decision to send your little child with a stranger, and that is better than them being with you. What kinds of conditions must be in place for you to make that choice for your child? Right. So you have people coming up from Honduras. You have people, like I said, Haiti and so forth. And so what happens is that it's a formality, in a sense, right? and that you have to do the things in order to say I'm seeking asylum, and then you're given a temporary status, and that temporary status does allow you to be able to travel. It does allow you to be able to work while your case is being decided.
Okay.
Right. So you get this temporary status, and then once your case is decided, then you can come. And I'm actually, I've worked on 2 asylum cases. I'm remembering another case that I worked on where it was similar. In the case of this woman, for example, the winning, what won the case was a beautiful act by one of my best friends from college, who speaks Arabic, but not just your day-to-day Arabic. She actually reads and understands very formal Arabic. And this woman, her father was an imam in an African country, and when she left her husband, from the perspective of her family, she had brought shame on the family. And so he issued a fatwa. And it was my friend's translation of that fatwa that saved this woman's life. Right? Because she was able to demonstrate that if she were sent back home, her family would kill her and her government would do nothing to protect her.
Okay.
And it's a challenging argument to make. It was made under VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, which I think had temporary status at that time. I mean, it was very complex. It took us about 2.5 years, before we finally were able to prevail in that case. But I get that in the media there is this picture of people just sort of waltz in and are given work permits and can go and live wherever they want. And you and I both know from our own experiences, which were not as arduous, that it's not like that. I don't know if you remember, if you were old enough to remember, getting up at 3 a.m. to go to Los Angeles and wait in line for several hours before the place even opened, hoping that you could get in. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but Tabi, again, coming back to reality, like how that's the reality of lots of people with the same need. You're gonna have to stand in line. And my question as I'm listening to you talk about this, well, several questions, but one is, is we talk about people coming in and getting work permits, but the reality is that they're coming in and they're getting EBT cards. They're coming in and they're getting Visa cards and they're getting housing, and there's an infrastructure that has to be built and set up um, and ran in order to figure out where people are going to live, where their kids are going to go to school, what's going to happen to them, how are they going to get clothes. It's winter in Chicago. They're coming from places where there's no possible way that they could have clothes and be prepared, for the weather in Chicago, New York. How are we going to solve all these problems? So, the reality is that this has created um, uh, an impact uh, on our budgets to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, to the extent that the mayor of New York is saying this is simply not sustainable. So back to reality, how is there no limit then to what we're able to to do in this respect?
Well, what does your faith tell you?
My faith tells me that uh, these, there's a stark difference between taking matters into your own hands and doing something that you know is wrong or against the rules, and um, putting your faith in God and stepping out in faith because you feel that God is moving you in a particular direction. There's a stark difference.
But wouldn't that assume then that every single person who is applying for asylum has broken the rules?
No, I don't, I have a feeling that when we're talking about, women who are escaping a situation, where their husbands or families are going to kill them, um, is not the majority of people who are crossing the border. I have, my sense is that there are very legitimate asylum seekers and asylum cases of people who need and deserve it. Um, uh, but that does not account for the hundreds of thousands of people who have crossed the border. And I have a feeling that many of these people are simply seeking a better life, better opportunities for their kids and a better future, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, that's my sense. And um, but you know, irregardless of, even though I don't know what those numbers look like, what I do know is that there has to be a plan in place, um, so that these things can be made possible. Even if we want to do this for everybody, we have to have a process for which this can be done, which is sustainable. And currently, that's just simply not, it doesn't seem to be the case.
So then let me ask you this, because your rationale seems to be that when people do things honestly, God steps forward and provides.
Is that a question?
Well,
I
I want to confirm my understanding of what you're saying.
what I'm saying is, if you want God to act on your behalf, that um, that yes, you need to do things honestly. Or
Okay.
uh,
So what if the same number of people who are coming in now, if we could prove that they were doing things honestly,
mhm.
how might, if in any way, how might that change your calculations?
Well, I don't know what God is doing in their life, or what God wants to do for them. I don't know that America is the place that God wants to bring them. I know that that's their desire and that's in their heart, and it might be the solution that they see. But I don't know what God sees for them. But God is able to do anything. So if that were, for instance, the plan that God had for their life, then that would be the appropriate thing to do, and provisions would arrive, just like the prophet was fed by ravens. Um, provisions would arrive, but that's not what we're seeing. We're we are we're seeing a situation that is again not sustainable. We, we're going from a $400 million shortfall to a nearly $1 billion shortfall. So that doesn't seem to be what is happening.
Mhm. Mm. This is so very illuminating. And thank you for this, because what you're explaining to me is something that it's an explanation that has never occurred to me.
Mm,
So, I didn't know that this might be part of how people are thinking, right? Is that um the burdens that are being now faced by the people of Chicago uh might be coming because um the people who are, you know seeking to save their own lives, or if we want to use your description of it, that they want better lives, are doing it by means that, from it, what it sounds like you're saying, they're doing it by means that God cannot bless.
I can't speak for individual cases, but uh, yeah, I mean, if you are seeking to do something with God's blessing, um, but your plan is to break your plan is to be subversive. It might not be it might not align with you know again, unless that is you know uh how God has called you, that's your divine plan. I can't speak to people's divine plan, um but I have a sense that uh the majority of people, um who are crossing, this has never crossed their minds. It is simply a matter of America or bust, and this is the way to do that. I don't think that this is a spiritual issue for many of them.
Hmm.
It's my sense, but
Okay.
of course I can't speak. I'll share a story. I There's a place in Chicago that's kind of designated for motor coaches to stage. Um, and I was there one day, and I had gone to the supermarket and bought a case of water. On my way back to the motor coach, I noticed a young, Hispanic lady who looked like an immigrant, um, out there with her baby. I assumed that she was um, looking for money, um, there at the entrance to the parking lot of the supermarket. And so when I noticed her, I got a few bottles of water and crossed the street, and I gave them to her and gave her some money, and began to speak to her in Spanish, and asked her about her journey and how things were going. You know, and at the end of our conversation, she told me that she was she was trying to get back. She was going to go back. And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because it's hard. It's hard." And that's how our conversation ended. "Es duro," she said. Um, and so it made me realize too that um, there are also people who have a sense of perhaps the promised land, where they think that America is going to be a certain way, and when they arrive, um, and when I say a certain way, um, basically that their needs will be met, and um, and they'll have a chance for this and that. And I'm sure there are charlatans who are looking to benefit from the dreams of people, who are willing to tell them these things. But whatever happened, this young mother decided that it was better for her at home than on the streets of Chicago, begging, and that she was trying to return. Um, so there are probably all sorts of people in all sorts of stories and situations, etc. It's really hard to encapsulate that, especially as a lay person. Um, so I can only do so much to try and assess, what is best in this situation. And what seems clear to me is that the current situation is unsustainable, and so we need uh, we need to, you know, reassess and figure out, you know, a better way to make this happen because, um, clearly we can't pay for the current method that we're using. We just can't pay for it.
Mhm. So, I seem to see a little bit of a slimmer of a glimmer, a sliver of a glimmer of opportunity, perhaps to find some alignment around this because I'm thinking about like what I'm experiencing right now as I'm hearing you say what you're saying, right?
Mhm,
And uh, being transparent, I'm in a place of massive resistance, right? In my body, I'm
mhm,
feeling very tense, and there's a part of myself that wants to cry.
mhm,
Hearing you say what you're saying, and it's really interesting because to me because there's this book that is contributed to inspiring this show, and it's called The Righteous Mind by
mhm,
Jonathan Haidt, I believe that it is. And in that book, he outlines in a way that I find to be very accessible the difference between liberals and conservatives.
mhm,
And it's really funny because as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm like going down the checklist in the book. You know?
mhm, mhm.
And it's like, wow, it's like it's right on. Um, but what I think I'm not hearing from you is a blanket no, but you're saying not this way.
At least, yeah.
Okay,
Like
so if that's at
like I said,
least.
like I don't know, this isn't my area of expertise, but
Mhm.
what seems clear to me is that whatever we're doing now is not sustainable.
Okay. So if we were to find something sustainable, how would you feel about immigrants?
I don't have any problem with immigrants or immigration at all.
Mhm.
Um, I you know, I'd be very happy to see people's dreams come true. Um, so if we found a way to do this that was sustainable and we could pay for it um, and the country grew and, fantastic. After all, we're a country of immigrants.
Not really.
We're not?
No.
Oh, okay.
If we were a country of immigrants, then you'd have to exclude African Americans and Native Americans, and they count too.
Yeah, but
And they did
okay.
not immigrate.
No, I didn't say everybody immigrated, but
Well, we
the,
are a
ma-
country of
the majority
immigrants.
of us did immigrate and continue to immigrate. Um, and it is still a um, a very sought after destination for people wishing to leave their countries and move somewhere else. So so in several senses, I think it's fair to say.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying that, the United States is sort of like a prized jewel, and that we ought to be protective of that jewel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I say protective, I don't mean that we just try to keep people out, but I mean, we don't lose it. We don't, uh, I mean, there's, there's a real price to pay when you can't pay your bills. Uh, I, I don't, I don't know how that's controversial in any sense. Um, you can't just, okay, we have a $400 million budget shortfall, and next year it's 981 million, and then next year's 1.5 billion. Like that's not. Eventually, you're going to lose your city. It's just reality.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to solve those problems. we can't just ignore them, um, based on based on our desire to do the things that we would like to do.
Right. Well, I appreciate the pragmatism in your approach, in your analysis, right, of the situation. I will say that where I remain unconvinced, not that you're trying to convince me of anything,
Right.
but
Right.
where what I find to be a sticking point
Mm-hmm.
is that, from my perspective, what you are saying does not align with your faith. That you putting that on to the condition of the person who's coming in, rather than thinking about God loves like you said, God loves a cheerful giver, and about going the extra mile even when people don't deserve it. And I think about that verse that says, what you have done for the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I keep wondering, where is all of that in your in your analysis?
Well, that's me getting off of my bus and bringing water to someone that I see as an immigrant and in need, and giving her money and speaking to her in her language and listening to her. That's where that is. I don't have a problem with her. Um, I show love and compassion to her, but as a political, as a system, as a political structure, or maybe a governmental structure, we have to we have to find a way to do this that we can pay for, that we can sustain.
So God can't enable the government? Like God can't,
The
create
government has no
resources?
interest in God. So to say that, what God can and can't do, God won't do what you don't want him to do for you. Like, if you have no interest in God acting in your life, he's not going to barge his way in there and impose his will. He has to be invited. And the government has no interest in that whatsoever.
Wow. This gets more and more fascinating with every moment. Wow. Okay. Okay. Um, all right. Yeah. And I am appreciating learning new things about
Well,
ways of
I mean,
thinking about things.
is that a hot take, that the government is not, the government doesn't seek God's will in in what it does or does not do? They're not uh, uh, praying about, uh, they're not asking God to supply provisions so that they can do this good thing on the earth, in Congress. That's just not how it works. Uh, so to say that what God can and can't do, that's more at a personal level. But we're not a theocracy in any sense. We're a constitutional republic, and we um, we're not. Uh, uh, how do I put this? I don't want to say separation of church and state, just as a blanket statement, but our laws are not founded on any particular religion or religious bias. Um,
Right. And I do want to clarify for people who are listening who might be like really confused about the position that I'm taking, because there is position in this. I'm going to acknowledge that, or the arguments, the arguments that I'm putting forward. This mainly for the purpose of digging deeper to sort of excavate, right? Asking, these questions that assume a certain belief system, right? So I want to acknowledge that this assumes a particular belief system, and that not everybody shares this belief system. And it's not to say that I'm endorsing one belief system versus another, but because I happen to have insider information on your belief system, we were raised in the same belief system, that allows me to navigate, asking the questions that I ask in a particular way. And so again, what I'm coming to is understanding. I mean, what I'm talking about is not something that happens on the basis of theocracy at all. So it's not about the government's policy saying we're going to pray, right? That God gives us the resources to be able to handle the situation. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about from the perspective of a person who believes in, the omnipotent power of the divine. Like, you believe in the omnipotent power of the divine, and yet you come up, well, I don't want to diminish it by saying you come up with, but your paradigm shuts off that omnipotent power in ways that I've just have not encountered before. And I am finding it very, very interesting, and I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, I mean, these are very, very interesting questions. They really are. And talking about it, we don't often get to explore our ideas in this manner by answering questions and being, probed, in terms of, so this is a journey and helpful for me as well. But, I share a little bit, I think, of your surprise, in the sense that for me, there's just some very kind of basic fundamental ideas on what how, I guess, maybe how faith works, since that's the question at hand. I understand that God is omnipotent and has unlimited resources, but I still only pray for my daily bread, and I don't necessarily, I don't try God in the sense of I'm going to spend every penny that I have, and then use my credit cards, because I know that God will sustain me, or God can cover it. I still have a sense that I need to be frugal and responsible, and etc. with my resources, but that the things that God wants to happen in my life, or to happen, that He will make provision for. That is, I guess, how I see faith. Not that I put God in a position to have to act, I guess you could say, by making my own decisions, but by seeking to align my will with His, and believing that He will make provisions for His will to be done.
Right. Wow. Again, I'm just this conversation is just blowing my mind all over the place, because it's giving me opportunity to see where I think the if you want to call it friction, or where the disconnect, right, where the difference perhaps is, because and it's so interesting, because from my perspective, it's so tiny, it's like such a sliver, and yet it's also profound, because it leads to such different conclusions, right? So here's my story. So I too have gone through, a period of time of economic challenge, right? And this was, right at after, well, for me, it was after 2010, I lost my job. And so to help make ends meet, I played my guitar and sang for tips, on the platforms of New York City subway system. And, so it's called busking, right? So I was a street performer basically, but in the subway system. And one of the more, enduring memories that I have of that, and like life-changing, just very formative experience that I had, was one evening I was out there playing, and as I was singing and playing, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man who was a little ways away, and he was leaned up against there's these enormous trash bins in New York City, right? And so it was big and heavy enough that it bore his weight, and he was sort of leaning against it, and he was standing there listening to me play, which is a little bit unusual because usually what happens is people come into the station and they're sort of a captive audience. This is one of the best things about performing on the platforms in New York City, is that they have to be there. They're waiting for a train, right? And then what happens is that the train comes, usually it's about 3 to 5, maybe 7, maybe 10 minutes between trains, right? During rush hour. And so they get on and they leave, so that if you stink, you don't have to know about it, right? They leave. But this was a little bit different because this guy was standing there as trains were going through, so he was actually listening to everything I was doing. So I noticed him, and so there came a point, the train pulled out, and I wanted to take a break. And so I stopped singing. I put my guitar in the stand, and I sort of sat back, and grabbed some water. Now, I should also say that this man was unhoused, and I could tell, because in New York City, you have people who are out, panhandling, or, panhandling basically, who do that for a job. Actually, they put on the clothes and they look, really destitute and so forth, and they're not at all. And then there are the people who actually are. And you can tell the difference. If you've lived in New York City and you know how things work, you know the difference. And this person had been unhoused for a long time. You can tell. And so, he was there standing against this trash bin, and he had a paper cup in his hand. And it was kind of crumpled, so he'd had it for a while. And so when I took my break and I grabbed my water, he walked over to me. And he came over to me, and then he took his cup and emptied all of the coins in his cup into my tip jar.
Mercy.
And I was like, that is faith. That was such a lesson for me. Such a demonstration of faith. Because I'm pretty certain that he can't say necessarily where his next meal is coming from, where he's going to find resources for anything. And yet he had the power. I mean, that's power. For me, I see that as power to divest himself of, this material thing here, this money that he had in his cup. And he went, it was such a humbling experience, and profound and powerful, that he took what would appear to me to be the last money that he has, the only money that he has at that moment, And the only thing that I can think that allows him to do that is because he knows more is coming. He knows more is coming. He has, you know, and that is what I understand our faith tradition to have taught us, that the resources of the one who sustains us are immeasurable. He owns the cattle of 1,000 hills. And we are not to worry. We're told again and again and again, don't worry. And so that is the mindset that I come to this from when it comes to thinking about, you know, what are we going to do with all these immigrants? I see it as a potential, an opportunity to just see how amazing the universe is when it comes to, you know, providing, right? I mean, oh my gosh, we're told so many times, you know, consider the lilies of the field. They sow not, neither do they reap, and yet they are dressed in the finest raiment, right? And so that's why I think it is difficult for me to hear, you know, your perspective, and then I also have to think to myself whether that is an expression of a scarcity mindset on my part, right? Thinking that somehow your perspective limits what can happen. And so that's something I have to work on and I have to work through, and it's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast, is to learn and give opportunity to other people to learn how to become comfortable with, you know, ideas and beliefs that, you know, are different from one's own, and to not see them as necessarily a threat, right? Because when I told you that I'm feeling tense and I feel like crying, you know, that is a response to a stimulus that is, you know, that I am perceiving as a threat. And it's really important, you know, to have that mental exercise to say, oh, I'm feeling this in my body, which means that I'm perceiving a threat. So what is it that he, you know, my brother is saying that leaves me feeling threatened? And then what does that mean in terms of the way I respond? Right? Because if a person is in a place of threat, the response typically is fight, flight, freeze, appease. And that's what usually happens when people are having conversations like these.
And
right?
that's what we're experiencing, in the general milieu. You know, all across America, it seems that we're having difficulties in just having conversations. And we're recognizing now that this polarizing effect is increasing, and it's not good. So this has been very important, I think, extremely important. Like you said, not so much even in terms of getting somebody to change their mind, but in taking the first steps of the ability to have a conversation about what do you think, what's on your mind, and what might be driving that. That's those are the first steps, and that's I think, you know, one of the best things that's kind of come out of this opportunity to sit down and talk.
Well, you know, Yoni, I thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I understand that it took a leap of faith on your part because, you know,
Yeah,
it's my show.
yeah,
And I could have
yeah, yeah,
taken it in many different ways. But then also, I appreciate your generosity, you know, of spirit and of your time, and then also holding space with me.
yeah.
You know, because it did require that holding space with me. It's funny, Yoni. You know, I'm a person who and I'm not saying I'm the only one, but nuance means a lot to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have, if I may share with you, a little bit of a nuanced view about this polarization.
Mm-hmm.
And my nuance on that viewpoint is that it's not that we have become and are becoming more polarized.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we're becoming more aware of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Um, yeah, and we could. That's a whole different. That's a whole nother topic
Mm-hmm.
that we could explore sometime, perhaps. But I have a feeling that, um, well, yeah, I don't even know if I should open that Pandora's box, but yeah, there's that is a multi-layered issue, and that would be another interesting kind of thing to unpack.
It really would be. And, as you were saying that, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we could do this two ways. One is that we could have an extended version of the show. But then I don't know what your day is like and what your plans are. So, you've already given me an awful lot of your time, and I really appreciate that. And so perhaps it's the second choice is that I invite you to come back and we, continue the conversation,
Hmm.
around that, because it is, I sense that you are understanding this too, that nuance actually is really important. It's so interesting how um, some of the more profound uh, places of importance, right, are contained in what seems to be the most minute kind of thing.
Hmm.
So just that shift in perspective as to, are we becoming more polarized, or have we always been polarized and are we just now recognizing it, right?
Hmm.
So there's that, and then also in terms of how we approach um, faith, right, and what it means in terms of our politics.
Hmm.
Um, Right. So, but this has been really wonderful, Yoni. I appreciate it. Now that listen, I'm going to give a caveat out there too for people who are listening and who know me. You can't call me Tabi. You don't get to do that.
Ah, uh-huh.
Goose, gander, whatever. I know what you're saying, and I didn't bring it up. So, fair plays. What I've forgotten what the saying is, but
Turnabout is
I
fair
rec.
play, I believe.
Pardon.
It goes something like turnabout is fair play,
Yeah, exactly.
something like
Turnabout is fair play.
that.
So yes, if I got to call you Yoni, you get to call me Tabi. But these are our home names.
Oh man.
Yeah. Is there any last statement or thought? Let me not make it so formal as statement, but is there any last thought, or what last thought would you like to share?
I really benefited from I don't get to watch you work ever. And so this is really the first time that I've experienced you kind of in your element in terms of um, working through conflicting ideas. And I had a really, really good time. You made me really comfortable. Um, and I really enjoyed the way that you that you listened. And I could tell you listened because you would repeat back to me, what you had heard. And there's a fear that when you come in to have a conversation that it's going to be somewhat contentious or combative, especially when we're talking about ideas that are really kind of core to us, or politics, religion, etc. And you do such an amazing job um, in uh, conducting such a conversation in a wonderful way, even though you have your own ideas and your own beliefs and your own, um, uh, you know, ideas about the world. And I really love that. So I can leave with that.
Well, thank you. And that is the highest endorsement ever, because, um, you know, you're a womb mate, if you will.
Yeah.
So you know all of my flaws.
Yeah.
Like you've seen me at my worst. And
Um,
so for you to give me that kind of a review and endorsement means
yeah.
more than I could ever say. Thank you so much. And back at you, because even well, I shouldn't say even though, acknowledging, let's say acknowledging that you and I approach the issues that we've talked about from, different places, and maybe we come to different conclusions.
Mhm.
I appreciate that I've also had my mind expanded and learned a lot in this conversation. And that could only happen because you were willing to, be, transparent and vulnerable. And I appreciate that about you.
Awesome.
Good. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. I hope that you appreciated and enjoyed this conversation. I invite you to come back. If you think that you would be a good guest on this show, please feel welcome to reach out. If you're watching this on YouTube, we've got the comments down below, and I can't wait to see what happens in the comments. But share your thoughts. If you are listening on a podcast platform, we have a website, and there'll be a link to that website where you can also get in touch. We wish you a wonderful day and great conversations. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Hi there. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of The Hate Show. In the intro video, I mentioned that I believe that it is critical that when we have these conversations, we do so on the basis of accurate information. And so I want to update some of the information that I gave you about immigration and asylum policy in the United States. First, when we talk about the requirements for getting asylum in the United States, I mentioned two. There are actually three. The first is that you hold a belief, perhaps it's a political belief, or you belong to a vulnerable group in your country. And the second is that you have a well-founded fear that because you belong to this group or because of your beliefs, you are the target, or you likely would be the target of torture and perhaps even being killed. And the third element is that your government will do nothing to protect you. So I wanted to be sure to be complete in the information that I gave. When I had the conversation with my brother, I mentioned two out of those three, and I wanted to make sure to correct that. The second has to do with how you indicate that you'd like to claim asylum. And there are a number of ways of doing that. What I mentioned is that you present yourself to a border officer and that you will be arrested. So this is about terminology, and for some people it might be just sort of a matter of semantics, but it can matter. And so the language that is used in the policies today is that you will be detained. So it doesn't mention arrest, but that you would be detained. And so when you're detained, then there's a process that happens where they are looking to remove you from the country, and it is during that removal process then that you make your claim for asylum. Now, to be sure that you get the best information possible, since this is not my area of expertise, right? So I have been on a team when I was a junior associate at a law firm. We had a pro bono case for asylum, and I was on the team that helped to get asylum for our client. So I do have more experience with this than the average layperson, and it also is not my area of expertise. So I want to turn it over to the experts. Check out the description, the show notes, or the description if you're watching this on YouTube, for a couple of links that I'm going to post where you can get much better information that clearly defines what it takes to get asylum, and what the criteria are for asylum and what the process and the procedures are for doing so. Thank you again for listening. I so appreciate that you have chosen to join me and my guests for these conversations. I look forward to posting the next episode and to seeing your comments. I'd love to have some dialogue around this. And then finally, if you think that you would be a good guest for this show, especially if you say if you voted for Donald Trump, if you are pro-life, if you identify as a conservative, you'd be a perfect guest for the show. So please get in touch. Check out the links again in the description below or in the show notes for how to get in touch with us and see whether you would be a great guest for this show. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.